Welcome to the 25th episode of Crimson Tide Today. I'm Zack Aitken, and I appreciate you joining me for another conversation about Alabama football. If you're joining the channel and you want to help continue to let it grow, make sure to leave it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share the video with a fellow Alabama football fan as well. And don't forget to head down to the comments section. I always enjoy hearing your opinions and discussing the biggest topics surrounding the Crimson Tide. For additional Alabama coverage, recruiting news, and reactions throughout the week, be sure to follow me on X and Instagram at ZAkin7. There's a lot to get into today, so let's settle in and let's start the opening drive. So, one position battle that I think is getting really interesting for Alabama during fall camp is the running back position. And I'll start by saying this: I still think Daniel Hill is the guy. Ryan Grubb has already said that the running back conversation, it starts with Hill, and that makes a lot of sense. This guy has experience. He led Alabama's running backs with 6 rushing touchdowns last year, and apparently he slimmed down this offseason to be a little bit more explosive heading into the season. And I actually think that could be very huge for him. We already know Hill gives Alabama that physical presence between the tackles, but dropping some weight, it's going to give him another gear and allows him to create more explosive plays, and he becomes a much more complete back. So right now, I would have Hill penciled in as RB1. But who's after that? I think it's a completely wide open conversation. And the name I'm becoming more interested in is A.K. Deer. Deer, he didn't play much as a freshman, and I think there was probably an assumption among Alabama fans that guys like E.J. Crowell or even Trayshawn Brown could pass him, and that became pretty quickly. But I'm not so sure about that anymore. Deer, he keeps getting mentioned during fall camp, and that's usually something that we're all going to pay attention to. Grubb, he talked about Deer making a ton of progress, particularly with his maturity and understanding the pass protection schemes. And the second part of that is very important. Being a talented runner, it's not enough in this offense. If Alabama has a new starting quarterback in Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, the coaching staff, they have to trust its running backs and pass pro. You miss an assignment back there, your quarterback's going to take a hit. So when Grubb says Deer has come a long way in that area, that just tells me he's becoming somebody that can be actually trusted with meaningful snaps. And the talent has never been a question with A.K. Deer. He was a highly regarded recruit coming out of the state of Mississippi, and he's explosive. He can make guys miss, and we even heard about him catching a touchdown on a rail route during practice recently. That receiving ability, it could give Alabama another dimension coming out of the backfield. But here's what makes this competition so interesting. It's not just Hill and Deer. Kevin Riley also has some experience as well. Trayshawn Brown, he was one of the surprises of the spring, and he's continuing to make plays. And then you've also got 5-star freshman E.J. Crowell, who might have as much raw talent as anybody in the room. I mean, that's 5 running backs who could realistically make a case for touches this year. And personally, I think that's a great problem for Ryan Grubb to have. Because Alabama, they have to be able to run the ball better this season. We've talked all offseason about Alabama improving the offensive line, but the backs, they have to do their part too. Alabama needs more explosive runs. They need backs who can contribute in the passing game. And they need guys back there who can also help protect the quarterback. I still think Daniel Hill gets the first opportunity this year, and I don't think Alabama needs to force this into being a traditional one-back offense like we've seen, 10, 15 years ago in the Saban era. But if A.K. Deer keeps developing, and if Trayshawn Brown continues making plays, and if E.J. Crowell starts showing that 5-star ability, you've got to ride the hot hand. Create competition. Make these guys earn every carry. And right now, A.K. Deer, he's making the strongest push out of anybody to turn this running back battle into a much more interesting conversation than we all expected. Alabama's already putting together a really impressive start to the 2028 recruiting class. But if Kalen DeBoer wants this class to eventually become one of the best in the country, there's still going to be plenty of big-time battles that Alabama's going to have to win. And I think one name that Alabama fans need to start becoming familiar with is Miles Tate. Tate, he's a 4-star edge out of Woodward Academy in Georgia, and he's currently ranked the number 103 overall player in the country by 24/7 Sports. He's also the highest ranked edge prospect in the state of Georgia in the 2028 class, and immediately that tells you that this is not going to be a very easy recruitment for Alabama. Because anytime you're talking about an elite defensive prospect from the state of Georgia, you already know Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs, they're going to be involved. But Alabama's right there as well. And I think that's what I like about what we're seeing from this Alabama staff. They're not backing away from these recruiting battles that they think they can win. Alabama's going into Georgia and trying to take some of the best players in the state away from the University of Georgia, while also battling other major SC programs like Auburn as well. And that's why I think Alabama should be doing on the recruiting trail. Tate, it's still very early in his recruitment. We're talking about a 2028 prospect, so there's still a little way to go in his recruitment. But this is the stage where relationships, they're going to start becoming important in the recruiting process. You don't want to wait until a player's senior year and then suddenly decide that he's somebody you want to have on your team. You want to be involved early, and Alabama is doing that with Tate. Now, from a football standpoint, I think he's the exact type of defensive prospect that Alabama should be continuing to target. He's already listed around 6'3" and 220 pounds, and he's still got 2 more years of high school football ahead of him. So imagine what that frame could look like by the time he's getting into college. This kid's athletic, he's explosive, and he's already shown enough as a pass rusher to become one of the top edge rush prospects in his class. That's why I also think this recruitment is also worth watching from an Alabama perspective. Look at what Kane Womack wants to do defensively. That Wolf position, it needs guys who can rush the passer, play in space, and give you some versatility off on the edge. Tate has spent plenty of time continuing to develop physically, but you can see how a player with his skill set could eventually fit into that type of role. And I've said this before when we were talking about Alabama recruiting. That defensive front is where I want Alabama stacking elite talent year in and year out. You could never have enough pass rushers in the SEC. Georgia, they built championship defenses doing exactly that. And where did Kirby Smart learn that? He learned it by being under Nick Saban's tutelage for years in Tuscaloosa. And if DeBoer and Womack are going to consistently be competing for championships, Alabama has to continue bringing in players who can affect the quarterback. Miles Tate, he definitely looks like one of those guys. Now, am I saying right now he's going to Alabama? Absolutely not. It's way too early to make that kind of prediction, but this recruitment has a long way to go, and Alabama's going to have some serious competition as well. But Alabama being heavily involved in this early part of his recruitment, it's very important because these are the battles that you want to be in. You're talking about an elite player at a premium position right in the middle of SEC country. And if Alabama can eventually go into the state of Georgia and pull out one of the best state's pass rushers away from its biggest rivals, that's the type of recruiting win that's going to get fans' attention. We're officially into preseason award watch list season, and Alabama is starting to get plenty of national recognition. But I'll be honest, I don't really care that much about preseason watch lists. I mean, nobody's going to be hanging a banner in Tuscaloosa because somebody made the Maxwell Award at this point in August. But what I do think is interesting, though, is looking at which Alabama players are getting this recognition. Because I think that's going to tell us something about where the proven star power is on this roster heading into 2026. Let's start with Ryan Coleman Williams. He's on the Maxwell Award watch list, which that goes to the College Player of the Year. And I think Coleman Williams has a chance to become one of the biggest stars in college football this season. We've talked about him a lot this offseason, but he's clearly Alabama's #1 receiver. He's got the talent, he's got the experience, and now he just needs the production to match that. If Alabama can get consistent quarterback play this season, I think Coleman Williams has a legit opportunity to put up some huge numbers in Ryan Grubb's offense. You've also got Michael Carroll on the Outland Trophy list, and personally, that's the one I'm going to be paying very close attention to this year. Because we talked all season, or all offseason, about Alabama's offensive line. That group has to be better. And if Michael Carroll suddenly develops into an Outland Trophy caliber offensive lineman, suddenly I feel a lot better that Alabama becomes the better team offensively than it did last year. But defensively is where Alabama's really starting to get my attention. Zabian Brown and Bray Hubbard, they're on the Bronco Nagurski watch list. Hubbard, he also is on the Lott Impact Trophy watch list and the Warfel Trophy list as well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that two members of Alabama's secondary are getting this type of attention. I've said it before. I think Alabama could have one of the best secondaries in all of college football. And Zabian Brown, he's already established himself as one of the best corners in the SEC. And Bray Hubbard, he's turned himself into one of the most important players on the whole team. You put those kind of guys alongside Keon Sabb, DeJohn Lee, and Red Morgan, and there aren't many obvious weaknesses in the back end of the defense this year. That's why I'm expecting Alabama's defense to take another step forward this season. And then there's one name on this list that I think could be really important. Lorcan Quinn. He's on the Lou Groza Award watch list. After what Alabama went through on special teams last season, I'll take that all day long for my kicker in the preseason because Alabama needs stability at kicker. They need somebody they can trust when a game comes down to a field goal. And if Lorcan Quinn can become that guy, that could legitimately be worth a win somewhere during the season this year. And then finally, Kalen DeBoer, he's on the Dodd Trophy watch list. Again, preseason awards, they don't mean anything once the football season gets kicked off in a few weeks, but I think DeBoer has an opportunity to change the national conversation around him this year. There's a lot of skepticism about whether Alabama could get back to competing for championships under Kalen DeBoer, and there's only one way to answer that, and Al Davis said it best: just win, baby. And when I look at the talent receiving national recognition on this roster, I think Alabama has enough pieces to do exactly that. Coleman Williams, he could become a superstar that he's been waiting for this whole career since he's been in Tuscaloosa. Carroll, he could anchor an improved offensive line. Brown and Hubbard, they can lead an elite secondary. And maybe Quinn finally gives Alabama some stability on the special teams. So forget about actually winning these awards for now. What matters to me is that Alabama has players capable of becoming some of the best at their positions in all of college football. Now it's going to be time to prove it on Saturdays. Let's put a bow on today's show with our Alabama player preview series, and today is a guy who I think could become one of the more interesting names to watch during fall camp. Today we're going to be talking about offensive lineman Mal Waldrop Jr., and if you haven't been paying attention to Waldrop yet, that might be changing pretty quickly. Waldrop, he's a sophomore offensive lineman from Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama, and coming out of high school, rivals had him as a 4-star prospect, and a couple other services had him as a 3-star as well. But he had plenty of major programs interested in him. Waldrop, he ultimately chose Alabama over schools like Auburn, Clemson, and Florida. And when you look at him physically, you can understand why Alabama liked his upside coming out of high school. He's listed at 6'5" and 324 pounds, and he definitely has the size to play in the SEC. And what's interesting about Waldrop is that he was recruited with the versatility to play multiple positions along the Alabama offensive line. But I think right now, guard looks like the place where he could be making his impact in 2026. Waldrop, he didn't play much as a freshman. He only appeared in 2 games, and he saw limited action. But that's not unusual for an offensive lineman at Alabama. Sometimes these guys, they need a year in the weight room, a year learning the offense, and putting in some time to adjust to the speed and the physicality of SEC football. And that's why Waldrop is becoming such an interesting player heading into year 2 of his career. He's competing for a starting job at left guard. Will Sanders is also very much in that competition, so I'm not sitting here saying Waldrop has already won the job, but the fact that we're even having this conversation, it tells you about how much progress he's made. Because I don't think that many Alabama fans entered the offseason expecting Mal Waldrop to potentially be a starter this year. But personally, I love seeing this. Alabama brought in a bunch of offensive linemen throughout the transfer portal, and it would have been very easy for a younger player like Waldrop to get buried on the depth chart and think about transferring to another school. But instead, he's competing. He's putting the coaching staff to seriously consider him as one of Alabama's best offensive linemen for this year. And that's exactly what you want from player development. Now, when I look at Waldrop's game, the first thing that obviously stands out is his size. At 324 pounds, he's got the frame to move people in the running game. And Alabama, they definitely need more of that this offseason because we've been talking about it. The offensive line, they have to be better. Alabama has to be able to establish the run, and they have to be able to protect whoever wins the quarterback competition. And they also need the 5 guys up front to play together with a lot of consistency. If Waldrop can win that left guard job, he's going to have an opportunity to become a major part of fixing that problem. But there's still a long way to go in this competition. Mal Waldrop Jr., he's gone from a developmental offensive lineman into somebody that with a legitimate chance to start at Alabama. And for me, he's quickly becoming one of the biggest offensive line names to watch for the rest of fall camp. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's show, but I want to hear from you. What were your thoughts on today's topics? What storylines do you want covered in a future episode? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and enabling notifications so you're always up to date with Alabama football coverage as we get throughout the season. For more Crimson Tide content between videos, including recruiting news, team updates, and analysis, make sure to follow me on X and Instagram at ZAitken7. Thanks again for watching the 25th episode of Crimson Tide today, and until next time, roll Tide.